Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member. I appreciate the opportunity to address a number of bills that I'd like to see move before this United States Congress, and I'll try to get through about 4 of them in these 5 minutes. The first one would be the Heartbeat Protection Act, which made a lot of progress in the last Congress, up to 172 co-sponsors, 174 co-sponsors, and it had all the votes in this committee to pass out of committee without amendment, and it had the votes on the floor. There was a decision, I think, made higher up not to allow that bill to move forward, which I deeply regret, but the progress that we made in this Congress, in the previous Congress, did seem to launch or trigger an epidemic of heartbeat bills across the country. And at the heart of these heartbeat bills is the idea that once a heartbeat can be detected, the baby is protected. And so that swept through this Congress almost to the point of sending a bill over to the Senate. But also the states, there are at least 10 states that have passed some version of that, a couple of them before then, a number of them since then, including Iowa. And now we have 25 of the 50 states that have either passed a heartbeat legislation or taken action on it. This is a movement in America, and I'd like to see this Congress step up to it and get ahead of it instead of following. I want to see a national legislation so that there's a standard policy for all of America, just like there is for marriage. Only I'd like to see it done by the legislature rather than the judicial branch of government, and I think everybody on this committee would think the same thing with regard to legislation rather than judicial action on large policies. And the second topic I'd like to take up is some immigration legislation. One of them is my bill, H.R. 140, the Birthright Citizenship Act. It's a legislation that I have authored here in this Congress for a number of sessions, and it recognizes that there are this is according to an old study, more than 10 years old. We had testimony before this committee in this room that there were between 340,000 and 750,000 babies born in this country when both parents are unlawfully present in America. That's called birthright citizenship. It has spawned birth tourism, and at that time, the turnkey cost of, say, a pregnant woman from China could fly to the United States, stay here, have the baby, receive all of the medical care, and be housed for a period of time, fly back to China with a birth certificate for that child for a turnkey price of $30,000. That price has gone up a little bit since then, I understand, but we also has a number of these automatic citizenships taking place, automatic births taking place, and we know that there are people that just come to America to have a baby so that that baby can be a citizen, and then 18 years later the process begins to do the Family Reunification Act. It's happening with families out of the Middle East that are of sometimes of suspicious history as to whether they favor the United States or work against us. So that's an important piece of legislation. I recognize the 14th Amendment of the Constitution says that all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are American citizens. But this Congress needs to evaluate that clause subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And the scholarship that has testified in this room has sided with me on this, in that means owing allegiance to. And so that's where you start this, and I think it needs to happen here. Second immigration piece is the New IDEA Act, and that's H.R. 904. And I named it that because there are no new ideas in this Congress, and it was a little bit, I thought I'd just test that out. But it does come together. IDEA, the acronym stands for the Illegal Deduction Elimination Act, and it clarifies that wages and benefits paid to illegals are not tax deductible for federal income tax purposes. And then it denies those wages and benefits as a business expense to the employer, so it's a powerful deterrent, and it moves those dollars from a Schedule C expense back over into the gross receipts column where they show up as net income, taxable interest and penalty. It brings the IRS into the immigration enforcement process, and it ties together the Social Security Administration and the Department of Homeland Security, so the right hand, the left hand, and the middle hand of government all know what each other's doing, and they're working on a common cause. It makes E-Verify permanent, but not mandatory, and it does give safe harbor for the employers who use E-Verify. So this is a smart, costless, effective immigration enforcement. And then in seconds, I will say H.R. 2260, the E-Bonding for Immigration Integrity Act. The President's working on this through executive action. I brought this to him, he agreed, but we can apply bonding to people coming in here on visas, and with that, the bonding can bring about enforcement, encourage them to go back home. I'd conclude my remarks and appreciate the opportunity to testify before this committee.
Thank you, sir. We'll now hear from the gentlewoman from